What's up, YouTube? Alright, in my last video, for those of y'all that are still around, I talked a little smack about owning ICCEs and why that's not such a good idea. This video, I'm going to concentrate more on just owning a bus, because there's a lot of you youngsters out there that want to do what me and Matt's 4290 and a lot of these other guys do with buses, and that's just own them and have fun with them. So for starters, I'm just going to talk more about, the responsibilities of it, the costs, just to give you guys a good idea of what's involved. So, it's not, owning a bus is not cheap. There's certain things you can do to save money on owning a bus. And I'll go over that a little bit with you too. But for those of you youngsters that want to buy a bus, you need to keep in mind that while a bus will go to auction for cheap, and it's easy to procure one, to buy one, the maintenance costs and the average monthly cost of owning a bus, is going to be a little expensive depending on what you do. I picked up my Thomas for... well, I'm not going to say how much I bought my buses for. I probably shouldn't say that. But I picked it up for a fair price at the auction. I got a really good deal for the Bluebird. So a lot of buses go at the auction for between $1,000 and $3,000, depending on how old they are. And depending on the location. I've seen them go higher and I've seen them go lower. When the school district that my Thomas came from sold its HDXs because they didn't want to deal with them anymore, they got $11,000 for a few of their buses just from the auction, which is unheard of, but they were in good shape. Granted, they didn't have air conditioning though. That's definitely it was pretty crazy that they went for so high, but they made some good money off those buses. A brand new bus goes for about $80,000 base price. That doesn't include any fancy options, no air conditioning. It's just bus, seats, lights, that's it. That may not even include LED lights. But so for you guys that want to own a bus, here in Texas, and I don't know all of the state's regulations, so I'm just going to go off of what I know from here. It isn't required here in Texas that you disable the warning lights or get rid of the stop sign or repaint the bus a different color. It is required that if you're going to operate as a non-school bus, that it cannot say school bus on it anywhere. So as you can see, my Thomas says cool bus on it. My Bluebird is completely blank. It doesn't say anything on it. So, and it's okay to have the warning lights and whatnot, but I'm not allowed to use them on the public roadways. That doesn't count for private property, parking lots, anything like that. That's a totally different story. I can pull up in a parking lot somewhere and run my reds to my heart's desire. Doesn't matter. But I can't do it on the road. I can't even run the show me lights on my Thomas on the road. That's illegal too. But it's all various things. So one of the things that your bus will need is maintenance. Tires. Brand new tires can range anywhere from $250 to $350. Sometimes even higher than that, depending on what kind of tires you want to get. Just your basic 11R 22.5 tire, I see them go for $250 sometimes higher than that. Now, if you want to run retreads on your back tires, you can get a good deal on retreads. Sometimes I've seen them as low as $150 for to retread some tires. That's not bad. So you got to worry about that. Oil changes, regular maintenance. So you do need to regularly maintain your buses. DTs require that you make sure that their coolant is in the correct pH range. Otherwise, you will eat up your cylinder sleeves. And a lot of motors are about the same. They want, too much acidic or too basic of a coolant will damage your engine. So you need to make sure that you get the right additive for it and keep up with that additive. Oil changes. So the DTs in my buses each hold 4 gallons of 1540 oil. And they also have 2 oil filters. So that's another quart and a half per filter. So already an oil change for one of my buses is about 100 to 150 bucks, depending on where I go to do it. And I do it myself. If you get somebody to do it, then you're going to pay more. So oil changes, fluids, you need coolant, you need power steering fluid every now and then, if you're leaking or if you got a bad hose, brake fluid if you're running hydraulic brakes, and then parts, air brake valves are relatively inexpensive, and they make rebuild kits for a lot of them that are super simple to work in. It's just you pop it apart, change the seals, and put it back in, you're done. Hydraulic brakes are a little bit different. With the Bluebird, I've had to replace sorry, there's a mosquito in here that's bothering me. I've had to replace one brake caliper on the Bluebird, and I plan on doing the other 3. So the brake caliper from Rock Auto was about 75 or 80 bucks. And Rock Auto does sell chassis parts for the internationals, so that's good. And I put it on myself. I had to take the wheels off. I had to change the caliper, and then I had to bleed the brakes afterwards. And the master cylinder in the Bluebird went out, if you guys remember from the video when Matt was last here. And that master cylinder was about $125, and it was a refurbished one, and it had a core charge. And what a core charge is you pay extra for the part, and when you take the broken core back for the core refund, then you get whatever your core charge was. So say it's a $30 core charge and it's a $100 part, so it's $130 altogether. Well, then you take your used part back in after you put the new one in, and you get your $30 back. I think I got the mosquito. No, I didn't. Let's see here. Where is that guy? Anyway, so you've got that to deal with. Other parts I've had to replace. If you guys have seen my old videos, I've had to... Jeez, this guy. I got him. Okay. No, I didn't. Stupid mosquito. There, we got him. Splattered on the windshield. Okay, back to what we were talking about. So I've had to, on the Thomas, I've had many breakdowns on the Thomas back when it was the 7.3. A tow bill in case of a breakdown is very expensive. I had to have heavy rescue come out and get me twice in this thing. Once when I shattered the flex plate, and that was about $250, and that was for 15 miles. And then when the motor blew, I had to have them come out, and that was about $320. And that was, for 25, 30 miles, somewhere like that. So tow bills are expensive. Wreckers are not cheap. So you need to factor in that if you're going to be driving these things around, you need to be ready to pay for a wrecker if something bad happens, or be able to fix it yourself. What else have I had? Getting parts, getting that flex plate, that was about $60 or $70 at the time. Buying the donor bus, that was $3,000. And that was everything I needed to put the DT in this Thomas. Everything. And then even then I still had to, since the transmission moved further back, the drive shaft that connects the manual and the auxiliary transmission had to be shortened because the back end of the manual came back a little bit further. So there's little things, and you got to realize that that's going to cost money. So you need to be ready that if you're going to be buying one of these, that you have a steady source of income so that you can support your hobby. And that's with anything, whether it's collecting muscle cars, any of that. Another thing is registration and insurance. So here in Texas, your registration is based off of your weight. So the Thomas and the Bluebird are kind of in their own separate categories because they weigh differently. The Thomas, I believe, is 16,700 pounds empty, and that's what they go by is your empty weight. And the Bluebird, if I remember right, is like 15,400 or something somewhere in the 15,000s. So it's not much of a difference in price. Considering a normal car, the base price is about $66. for registration in my area. So um, so, as you get over a certain weight, then they tack on more charges based on how much you weigh. So if I remember correctly, the Thomas's base registration annually was $125 a year. Okay. Insurance. You got to figure out how much you're going to insure your vehicles for. Right now, let's see, when I had the Thomas with State Farm before I went to Haggerty, which is collector's car insurance, I was paying somewhere, it was bundled in with all of my cars and everything, and I think I was paying somewhere around $80 or $70 a month for the Thomas, just for insurance. That doesn't include driving it and having fun with it. That's just insurance. That's it. $70, and you have to have insurance to drive on the roads here in Texas. And I don't think there's any state left that will allow you not to run insurance. Not only that, it's a bad idea to drive the buses without insurance, because what if you get say your brakes go out and you're driving down the road and you run into somebody? Well, all of a sudden, especially if you're driving fast, that's hospital bills you got to pay. Thousands and thousands of dollars, maybe even millions of dollars, and your insurance covers that. But, if you're not running insurance, then that's all out of your pocket. And you bet that, if you don't have insurance, the person's going to be taking you to court over it. So, insurance, a must. What I'm doing now with the buses is because they are over 25 years old. The Thomas is an 87, the Bluebird's an 88. They are eligible for antique plates, and here in Texas it's antique plates. Other states they have like historic plates. It's all the same. It's for collectors' vehicles. They are under the premise that the vehicles aren't being driven every day. They're not being driven all the time. They're just being driven, maybe on the weekends for fun every now and then. And so you get a highly discounted rate. So here in Texas, antique plates are $55 for 5 years. And this is in 2019. So if you're watching this way in the future, it may be different. So that's $55 before taxes. Now I've already got the Bluebird on antique plates, and it's 5 years registration, and after taxes came out, it was about $67, $66. That's impressive. So I don't have to get my plates renewed every year. I do it every 5 years. So that's really cool. That's a huge discount. Huge. And the Thomas is going to be going to that this month because it expires this month. So the Thomas will get antique plates as well, and it'll be good for 5 years. Because I don't drive them nearly as much as I used to. And the Bluebird's not ready to be driven yet all the time. It needs a tire. So you gotta think about that, And antique plates also, I believe that the driver has to be of a certain age in order to be operating these vehicles in some states. I don't remember if that's the case here in Texas, or if anybody, 16, 17, 18 can get antique plates on an antique vehicle. I don't know. I just know that antique plates are for 25-year-old vehicles. So, I hope this guy's not trying to park his trailer next to the Bluebird since my car is there. No, he's not. Okay. So that's another thing you have to worry about. I use, since I am over the age of 25, and my buses are over the age of 25, I can insure them with collector's car insurance. So I save quite a bit of money doing that. I pay a lot less for insurance than I did before. And granted, the Bluebird got dropped by State Farm because they had a new policy saying we don't insure buses for individuals for private use anymore. So the Thomas was grandfathered in. And what that means is that the Thomas had already been insured and they weren't going to change anything. That's what that means. So, but they weren't going to insure the Bluebird because of that. So I went to collector's car insurance. That's a big difference. But, there's so much to owning a bus. Fuel. So my two buses have 60-gallon fuel tanks. Most buses have either 60 or 100-gallon fuel tanks. Some of the shorties have less than that. So diesel fuel. Right now here in Texas, where I'm at, we are cheaper for fuel than a lot of states. And right now I think diesel is in the 250s or 260s a gallon, about November of 2019. So that's still a lot of money to put 60 gallons of diesel in. You can do the math. It's not that cheap. Also, I mean, gasoline is like in the 210s, 220s. So, even 60 gallons of gasoline. And then you have to factor in fuel economy too. Buses don't get that good of fuel mileage. Gas buses get somewhere between 2 and 4 miles to the gallon at best. Diesel buses get about twice that. They get about 7 to 9 miles a gallon. The Thomas gets a little bit better because it has no muffler on it. Here in Texas, mufflers are not required on turbocharged diesel engines. So, because the turbo counts as a muffler. So, I don't have the restrictive muffler on this, and then I have overdrive gear. But, that's not common. The Bluebird still gets factory fuel economy, which is about 7 to 8 miles to the gallon. It's not that good. So, you got to realize that you're going to be doing that. So, everything I've lined out is just the basic, pretty much the basic costs of owning a bus. It's not cheap. If you want to do mods, then you have to factor in how much, or if you're going to pay somebody to do it, or if you're going to do it yourself, and realize that because it's a bus and it's bigger, if somebody else is doing it for you, they're going to charge you more than they would for doing a car. Like, say, getting your windows tinted. In a car, you don't have that many windows. Windshield, back windshield, and 4-door windows, and that's it. You have a lot more windows here in the bus, and because you have 2-piece windows, you've got upper panes and lower panes, so that's 2 pieces of glass per window that you have to get them to tint. So that's going to add up really quick. Stereo installation, that's more wiring they have to run for speakers, more speakers they have to install. There's a lot of things that they have to, that somebody would have to do. Granted, doing it yourself is not too expensive if you know what you're doing and you buy at the right places. So, you don't even have to buy new parts. You could buy, as long as your wiring's new, you could buy used speakers and used stereo, and it'll probably work okay. But, so these are things you need to think about when you own a bus. Owning a bus, I'm not going to lie, it is fun. I really enjoy being able to come out here and sling wrenches at my bus and do things with them, but it comes at a cost. Right now, my Bluebird needs a tire. So, and dual tires are usually, here's the thing with tires. Steer tires up front are best if they're matched. So if you buy one, it's best to buy 2. That way they're matched. That way they run evenly, and you'll run better. Get better traction, you'll steer better. It's better all the way around. With your duals, if you put in the back, if you have one tire that has a lot of tread on it and one tire that has some tread on it, and I learned this the hard way with the Thomas after I had a dual go out, I bought a barely used recap, and I put it next to a tire that had about 30% of the tread on it. So what happened is that recap took the brunt of the weight, and it wore faster so that it would even out with the tire next to it. So when they finally evened out, there was about 15 to 20% of tread left on it, and that's that tire that went bald. So, there's things you have to consider when buying tires. I have to buy a tire for the Bluebird, and right now I don't drive it enough, to really care about what kind of tire I'm going to put back there. It has 10R 22.5s on it. Ideally, I'd like to put 11Rs in the back, just like the Thomas has on it, because it's a bigger tire. And it's a more common tire. 10R 22.5s are not very common anymore. They were mainly used on school buses. The other thing with the Bluebird is seats. Those seat covers are trashed in it. They are horrible. They are cracked. They feel like paper. They don't even feel like vinyl anymore. So I need to replace those. If you go to any school bus parts site, you'll see that seat covers are not cheap. And that's why I'm trying to find good used ones, because we throw so much away with these buses. Reusing good parts, it saves money, and it sends less garbage to the landfill, because they don't recycle the seat covers. When they shred these buses up, they get the metal out and everything else goes in the trash. So rubber, vinyl, the plastic and the switches, it all gets thrown away. None of that gets recycled. The scrappers, all they care about is the metal. So there's so much that goes into the trash. So, but if I were to buy new seat covers for the Bluebird, which I might still do, it's going to cost me some money. Replacing window glass, that costs money. There's so much that goes into owning these things. So I know you guys love watching me and love watching what I do, and I hope some of you guys get the chance to own a bus, because it is truly, for somebody that's an enthusiast that has fun with these things, it is a wonderful experience. It's fun. It's a blast. It sets you apart from everybody else, because you can say, hey, you know, I'm doing something that I enjoy. You know, not many people can say that. So, but it comes at a cost. So just for you guys that, you know, and I was the same way when I wanted to own a bus. I didn't know anything about it, and I learned the hard way. So I'm trying to put it out there so you guys know what it's like to own a bus. There's that mosquito again. So that you guys don't get into it and realize, oh man, what did I get into? I'm spending all this money and I can't afford this. You know, or I didn't expect it to be like this. Well, I mean, that's what happens, you know. The school district is no longer maintaining the bus. You are. And you're taking care of it. You know, it's like raising a child, or, you know, having a pet, or even having a family. You know, you have to support it 100%. Otherwise, it will fall apart, it will break, and then you won't be able to use it anymore. You know, and if you let something go too long that could be fixed, you know, then it's going to cost you more in the long run. I'll give you an example, and then we'll call this video good. There's a gentleman in the forums that I see on the various places that we all talk and share bus photos and whatnot, that has a Thomas 3800 with a DT 360 in it. It had an oil leak in it, and he was a young guy. He did not take care of that oil leak, and all of the oil drained out of that motor, or a good portion of it did. Well, all in the while it was doing this, he was running it. He wasn't driving it, but he was firing it up and having a good time with it. You know, driving it around his yard maybe, because he couldn't drive it on the road. It wasn't street legal. Well, before long, that motor had no oil in it, and he threw a rod, or maybe screwed up a bearing. Who knows? But that motor now needs to be rebuilt. So he could have spent, you know, $20 on a gallon of oil to top off the oil to keep it topped off, but he didn't. And what happened now is he's going to have to pay, you know, at least, you know, if he does it himself, he's going to have to buy a kit for, you know, a little over $1,000 to rebuild that motor, or he can pay $3 or $4,000 to have somebody rebuild it, or he can buy a replacement motor and pull the motor out of his bus. But either way, it could have been prevented. But because, you know, he didn't tend to it, now he has to pay. And I'm guilty of that too. You know, I had a rod knock in my Thomas in the 7.3. That's what that noise was. I didn't want to admit it. I drove it. It broke down and the motor blew. And, you know, and the rest is history. You know, I shouldn't have driven it, because if I wouldn't have, I could have saved a few $100 on a tow. But on the flip side, you know, I did get my DT. So sometimes things like that have their advantages, and there's, you know, a happy ending, you know, despite the misfortune. You know, there's positivity. So, but like I said, I'm not trying to discourage anybody from owning a bus, from, you know, getting into it. It is a fun hobby. It really is. There's a lot of great people out there, and I hope that, you know, I hope that some of you, if not all of y'all, can, you know, take advantage of it. I definitely wouldn't buy something new, as discussed in the last video about ICCEs, but I really hope that you guys can learn something from this, and you guys will get to enjoy it as much as I have. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for watching, guys.